In the 90s, we got great comic book shows. One of them was Spider-Man the Animated Series, obviously. While it was not on the level of, say, Batman or the X-Men, it was still an enjoyable show, animation errors and all. It also had a kick-ass theme song by who else? Aerosmith. Let's check out the games based on it, which both came out in 1995. Alright, so first up is the Super Nintendo version of Spider-Man, which was developed by Western Technologies and then butchered by LJN.
First time we've crossed paths, I believe.
I know. By the way, did you guys notice that the LJN logo on this cartridge has conveniently been cut off or scraped off or something? Yeah, it's not like we did it or anything. This is a side-scrolling action game with non-linear levels, where Spider-Man has to recapture a host of villains that have escaped from Ravencroft prison. Breaking down this game, we will start with the graphics. They are passable. I mean, they're bright and colorful, capturing the look of the series as they should. The character models don't quite completely work for us, though. Spider-Man just looks a little husky, if you know what we mean. And when he walks, he looks a little, goofy? Oh, I'm gonna harm you, and call us crazy. But don't these enemies look like Master Chief? Kind of, sort of, maybe, not really, if you squint.
The controls function as such. For the face buttons on the Super Nintendo controller, there's a punch, a kick, a jump, and a projectile, which is usually a small web blast. But you can collect grenades as well that you can switch out in the pause menu. You also have to collect extra web cartridges, because if you run out, you're kinda screwed. You can also collect health items and other collectibles throughout the game. The side buttons are pretty darn important, as the L button is used to run and to climb up walls. The R button allows you to swing, when of course there's a ceiling available. The levels usually have two planes, as you will need to use the jump button and up direction to access certain areas.
One thing that really bugs us with this game is that when Spider-Man walks, he is way too close to the edge of the screen, again! To us, this is bad game design, because it's so easy to run into an obstacle or fall into ditches. Not good! Also, attacking with your punches and kicks are not very effective. Weird for Spider-Man, right? The best way to attack is to use this duck kick or use your projectiles. One cool bonus, however, is that when you explore the sewers, you can find these number 4 chips. What? And with these, you can summon members of the Fantastic Four to help you out. Oh, now it makes sense. That, along with the music, are the highlights, but overall, the game is pretty mediocre on its own. The presentation is decent for what it's worth, but the controls and level design really hamper the experience.
The Sega Genesis version was also developed by Western Technologies, but this time published by Acclaim.
Wow, I guess they learned fast.
The gameplay is more or less the same, but there are subtle differences as we transition to the Genesis format. One thing we prefer is the graphics in its outing, as they are darker than the Super Nintendo counterparts. Well, we are DC fans, so we do tend to like darker things.
I guess we need to learn to smile more.
Spider-Man just looks more badass in this version too. To some, graphics with a slightly darker tone may look rather muddy, but these visuals never come off that way. In fact, we would argue that they are slightly more detailed here in this game.
With the Sega controller being more limited in its button uses at the time, one is used for an attack, jump, and the other is projectile. Like the Super Nintendo version, your primary projectile is the web shot. But you can switch out to other things like grenades, and you, again, can also get some help from the Fantastic Four. I guess they just happen to be in the neighborhood. The friendly neighborhood. There is no run button here, as you will run automatically when you move. And also, here Spider-Man stays toward the middle of the screen. Much better. The level designs are essentially identical, with different areas you will need to access with up and jump. And there are, of course, plenty of collectibles to acquire as well. Here, they feel a little easier to navigate. However, the animation for these characters is pretty choppy, and there are clipping issues when enemies attack.
The music is acceptable, but sound effects for this game can get downright ridiculous. For example, when you destroy enemies, you will get a generic bad guy scream. And you also get that very same scream when you kill bats. Overall, the Sega version does have generally the same problems as the Super Nintendo version, but it is marginally better with the graphics and more streamlined controls.
In 1992, we saw a team-up between two of our favorite Marvel properties when they hit the 16-bit machines. This is Spider-Man and the X-Men in Arcade's Revenge.
Both versions were developed by Software Creations, with the Super Nintendo version being published by LJN and the Sega Genesis version being published by Flying Edge.
Fun fact, the storyline for these games were based on an Uncanny X-Men comic. The game opens up with Spider-Man swinging through the city looking for Cyclops, Storm, and Wolverine. Wouldn't you? When he sees Gambit being captured by the villainous Arcade and swings into action, the game opens up with what we can be called a training level, as you get used to your controls by jumping, attacking, and swinging. Here, you collect these, whatever these are, and blast a few enemies.
After getting through the training level, we find that Spider-Man and the X-Men are trapped in Arcade's murder world. The player must navigate different levels with different characters in order to get to the final level in which Spider-Man faces off against Arcade. Like a Mega Man game, you can choose between which character you want to use and in which order you want to tackle them. All the levels are more or less the same thing, labyrinth-type levels with collectibles and bad guys to destroy. Each character, of course, has individual abilities. We all know what Spider-Man can do, but Wolverine has his claws, which he can retract, and he can heal. Cyclops has his eye beams, Gambit has his charge cards, and then there's Storm, who gets stuck in a water level. Our condolences.
The graphics on the Super Nintendo are bright and fun to look at. From the characters and the environments, Spider-Man and the X-Men all look very faithful to the early 90s designs. Controls are fair enough. They're basic, but responsive, although the ducking looks weird and it doesn't help all that much. One notable issue we had with this game, though, is that some of the enemy placement can make areas of this game far more frustrating than it really needs to be. Overall, though, this game has plenty of challenge.
The Sega Genesis version features a slightly darker look, of course. The color scheme is switched out from blues to browns. In this case, we do prefer the brighter colors of the Super Nintendo, but here they still look fine. The controls are virtually identical to the Super Nintendo counterpart, as they both utilize 3-button configuration. One thing that is lacking in this version, however, is the sound effects. A lot of them are just missing, which is just weird. For example, in the Super Nintendo one, when Spider-Man's spider sense goes off, you hear a radar sound effect. While here, there's nothing. Same goes for enemy attacks, so that was pretty disappointing. The music for both games are also virtually identical.
Whether it is on the Super Nintendo or the Sega, Arcade's Revenge is a decent game. It's not game-changing in any way, but it is playable and it does have the novelty of playing a game with Spider-Man teaming up with the almighty mutants from Marvel. Nice tune. Anyway, in 1994, the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis got a side-scrolling beat-em-up developed by Software Creations and published by Acclaim and LJN. You know, usual suspects. This is Spider-Man and Venom Maximum Carnage. This game was based on the comic book storyline of the same name and features a host of special guest appearances from not just Spider-Man's world, but across all of Marvel.
Fun note, Maximum Carnage was used as a haunted house theme during a Halloween in 2002 at Universal Studios Orlando.
I wonder why.
The first thing that stands out here is the presentation. It is very much a 90s comic book come to life. These comic books back in the day had such a unique style, and it's definitely on display here. The game opens up with Carnage breaking out of his imprisonment. Along the way, he teams up with Shriek, the doppelganger. No, not that one! Although Spider-Man would totally get his ass kicked if they did. And more baddies that look to wipe out the Web Slinger and the monstrous Venom. Funny, this game feels more like Carnage's story, and Spider-Man and Venom are just kind of in it. Hey, we are fans of Cletus Cassidy. The cutscenes are semi-animated, and that puts a big smile on our faces.
Both games are identical when it comes to graphics and gameplay. The game is a beat-em-up with Spider-Man flair, so it doesn't exactly play completely identical to other beat-em-ups like Batman Returns. Here, you will need to rely and utilize all of your web shooter abilities to keep from getting swarmed during the battles, like making shields, doing scorpion snatches, and not to mention swinging and climbing up walls. The game only starts you off with one continue, so you really have to look around for those extra lives, health, continues, and summons that you can use to bring in the extra characters to help out. As the game goes along, you can choose between Spider-Man and Venom, and they can play their own separate levels. Venom plays a little heavier, which would make sense that he would be likely to muscle through the enemies. However, we prefer Spider-Man's agility when facing the hordes. Speaking of the hordes, this is the one thing we disliked. The enemies in this game look pretty lame. Like they just walked off the set of Spider-Man the musical. I mean, they don't look threatening at all. I'm sorry, but Sally and Lizzie here doesn't seem like we're the adversaries for Venom. Really?
For the controls, there is a jump, attack, and a web button. With the attack, if you manage to make multiple hits in a row, your health will start flashing and you will do a big attack. You can also grapple the enemies and throw them, and objects as well, so that is pretty standard for beat 'em ups. You can also use projectiles to catch enemies, so again, you use your webbing as much to your advantage as possible. As we said, these games are virtually identical, but one major difference here is the Super Nintendo version has superior music. No questions asked. As beat 'em ups go, we do prefer other offerings, but still, we do enjoy Maximum Carnage for what it is. The art style may not be for everyone's taste buds, but if you're fans of the 90s style, this game will give you a good time, as well as a good challenge. Now there is a sequel to this game called Venom Spider-Man Separation Anxiety. Unfortunately, we'll not be including it in this video. For two reasons. One, this video is getting a little long, and two, the most important reason, right here. Hey, we're poor.
Well, thank you guys so much for watching another episode of Sega Genesis vs. Super Nintendo. If you guys liked the video, please sure to comment below and hit a like button. And also, please feel free to let us know of other games we should probably compare and share. Such as insert game here. Anyway, thank you guys, and we will see you next time.
And remember, if you're a DC fan, that's cool. If you're a Marvel fan, that's cool. But don't be a fanboy.
That's uncool.